So I'm sitting here looking at the end of Esther chapter 8, and there's this big celebration that is a secular celebration at first, at the revelation that Mordecai has got the signet ring of the king and that he's issued this counter edict to allow the Jews to fight back against all the people who are about to reveal themselves as the one who wants to kill the Jews in response to Haman's order. All of that stuff is working out. And there's a giant secular celebration that happens in the citadel of Susa. And then immediately that is followed up with a description of an ethnic celebration on the part of the Jewish people, who are obviously happy because now they're allowed to fight back. And it's funny, it's pretty clear that they know they're going to win. And we're going to break that down here in just a minute. But I was going to do the thing that we do a lot of times where I'm like, oh, I remember, there's this thing that happened, or when I was a kid, this happened, or did you ever see that movie where, some kind of example, and then, likewise, it's like this in Esther. I was going to do that. And I was sitting there thinking, in my country, when was the last unified, spontaneous celebration of something that wasn't a foregone conclusion that happened people-wide? And you got to go back a long ways, don't you? I mean, what do you got? What are you coming up with there? Obviously World War II, right? I've referenced that a few times in the last couple of weeks. There was almost a reverse parades after the Vietnam War. There wasn't really much that happened in terms of unified national celebration during Bush 41's war in Iraq, Desert Storm, I guess we call that. It wasn't a celebration in response to 9/11, but the country seemed pretty unified for a week or two. And then the Patriot Act happened and stuff went off the rails pretty quick after 9/11. In that sense, didn't last very long. Man, there's nothing since then, is there? I think people thought it was pretty cool in 2008 when a country that used to have chattel slavery elected an African American. I think even people who voted against Obama had to acknowledge that's pretty cool. That's indicative of more of the values that, all people are created equal, life, liberty, pursuit of happiness, that kind of stuff. But that euphoria did not last long at all. It was just sort of business as usual policy-wise from the American Uniparty of the last 30 years. Am I forgetting something? Do we really have to go back to World War II to come up with some sort of unified celebration? Maybe the moon landing? It seems like it was more awe. Yeah, it's just kind of wild. I mean, maybe it's a very rare thing for an entire people group to be unified and celebrating some sort of singular outcome that everybody agrees is really exciting. And maybe rather than me sitting here scratching my head and lamenting that it's been the better part of a century since, what do I even say, my people group? I mean, I'm like a Scottish, English Viking who lives in the shallow mountain west of the Black Hills of South Dakota. I mean, what even am I? My people group, my people, the United States. Maybe instead of scratching my head and being sad that it's been so long, maybe I should instead be glad that there's anything that has happened in living memory that has unified us and caused us to celebrate. Maybe it is just truly a very unusual thing to have the kind of moment that we're about to read about here in Esther chapter 8, where it's just awesome and everybody's happy about it. And everybody from, one people group is going to set aside their differences and just be glad together. But I suppose when the threat is complete and total eradication, and then you find out that that's not going to happen, you're going to be pretty excited about it. So to me, it's easy to look at the passage that we're about to read next and be like, oh, they had a party and they were excited. How very, very nice for them. I'm really glad they had a party. That's great. But I think this is pretty singular. I think it's pretty unique. I think it's pretty special. And I'm going to try to soak that in while we talk about it today. Okay, Esther 8:15. Mordecai left the king's presence wearing royal garments of blue and white, a large crown of gold, and a purple robe of fine linen. And the city of Susa held a joyous celebration. For the Jews, it was a time of happiness and joy, gladness and honor. In every province and in every city, wherever the edict of the king went, there was joy and gladness among the Jews, with feasting and celebration. And there's one more little tidbit there that we might not get to until tomorrow. So again, two really obvious observations just as we look at the text. One, there is no moral squeamishness about this at all on the part of the original author. They don't anticipate any discomfort about the horrors of war and what this fight is going to mean for people. They just fully understand and accept, I guess, that people are going to get caught in the crosshairs and this is going to be bad. And there's just going to be a brief time of real ugliness. But they seem to just unequivocally believe that this is the right thing. Not a hint of conflictedness about this is present from the authors. They don't anticipate that from their audience. And apparently the people who lived through the event, at least according to the author and what we have written down, well, they didn't feel any ambiguity about it either. This is just straight up a win for the people of Susa. Order is being restored. The vision of the Achaemenid Empire and who we are as Persia is being restored because Haman's order was in direct opposition to what all of our art says, all of our legends, our founding mythos. It's in opposition to all of that. That just isn't who we are. And so the Susans are happy, but the Jews are even happier because they were going to get wiped out. So observation number one is that there's no squeamishness, there's no ambiguity about this. This is just happy in this Iron Age context. Observation number two is something I kind of alluded to a minute ago, but the Jews, look at the way they're reacting. The fight hasn't even happened yet, and they're celebrating. Why? Because they know they're going to win. How do they know they're going to win? I mean, probably they knew that they were good at war and that they were determined and that they were fighting to preserve their existence. To them, it seems like kind of a foregone conclusion that this is going to completely work out. Why else are they so confident? Well, maybe they have a little bit of that same sense of fate or providence that was evident to Haman's wife, Zeresh. Remember at the end of 6, when she hears what happened and how the tables have been turned, she and all of Haman's advisors and everybody, they all say to him, since Mordecai, before whom your downfall has started, is of Jewish origin, you cannot stand against him. You will surely come to ruin. They read the writing on the wall, pun absolutely intended, and apparently everybody was reading the writing on the wall. This is a foregone conclusion. The outcome is already known, but it looks like the remark here of Zeresh and the advisors of Haman back at the end of chapter 6 indicates that they were aware of the age-old feud that started when the Amalekites, a cousin people of the Hebrews, attacked them when they were in the wilderness, when they were homeless. They tried to waylay them and plunder all of their stuff and just leave them dead out there in the desert to be covered over by the sands of time. That's what they wanted. It didn't happen. And along the way, there's a whole bunch of stuff that a cousin people group of the Jews, of the Israelites, of the Hebrews, that they would look at and be like, ooh, when their God shows up, it does not work out well for others. Maybe they were fully aware of the Mosaic covenant. It's been a while since we've talked about that. Remember, this is the deal that God made with Moses largely in Exodus. It's spelled out over a really long period of time, but the summary is this. God is saying that great people that's going to come from Abraham, that's you, Moses and your people. I'm going to be your God. You're going to be my people. If you obey me, all the nations will know I'm the one true God because I'm going to bless you beyond measure. If you disobey me, all the nations will know that I am the one true God because I will punish you and correct you, and they'll be able to look at your behavior and then what happens to you in inarguable terms, and they will see the reality of who I am. So if that covenant was made with Moses, and if that covenant played out the way it sure looks like it plays out over the whole Old Testament, then you have to think that it's not just Haman and his ilk, the leftover Amalekites and Agagites, who know this narrative, but probably people around the empire have started to hear about this narrative. I mean, the stuff about Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego and Daniel and the lion's den, all of that stuff didn't happen very long ago. Remember, Daniel was there. The writing on the wall occurred the night that the Medes and the Persians conquered and divided the kingdom of the Babylonians descended from Nebuchadnezzar. This stuff is still really within living memory for people who would be around for these events in Esther. I think the reality here is that certainly the Jews, almost certainly the enemies of the Jews, at least most of them, and even a bunch of the Gentiles who didn't really used to know much about the Jews before the whole Persia thing happened, I think they all have got a strong sense that when the God of the Jews, when the God of Abraham shows up, you don't want to be on the wrong side of that. It's not going to work out. And the God of Abraham in the Old Testament, straight up, he does violence toward the nations. And if you really believe that he is the one true God, the God of all things who is right in all of his judgments, then it would be up to him to call in the payment on his judgment. It would be at his discretion to issue a judgment, to punish a people whenever he dang well feels like it. And I've got a sneaking suspicion that everyone involved in this story knew that. And when word starts to get out about how things have played in the courtroom of Xerxes and how the tables have turned and how crazy and fluky and unlikely it seems that could ever possibly happen, I think there are a whole lot of people of a whole lot of different ethnic backgrounds who perk right up and they're like, okay, I've heard these kind of stories. My grandpa tells a story about this from before the Persian conquest back in Babylon. There is something real about their deity, and the best you can hope for is that he just chooses to sit it out from our perspective, because the stuff he does when he becomes involved in a situation is unequivocal. And I think all these people perked right up at these details. I think Zeresh and Haman's buddies were the first to figure it out, but quickly everybody figured it out from the reader of Esther's perspective, what was happening all along. God's never absent. He's never been absent. He was on top of this situation. And it looks like there is a whole lot of fear and heightened awareness and even a sense of this is a complete foregone conclusion that emerges from everything that's happened as the details come out, as the edict goes forward, and the result is a celebration that occurs before the matter is even actually settled on the field of battle. And we're going to get one more really interesting little wrinkle about how people responded to this in the last verse of Esther chapter 8 that we're going to look at tomorrow. I'm making progress on those Nehemiah books. I could, if you wouldn't mind, if you are a patron of the program, I could use a little bit of feedback from you over at patreon.com/thetmbh podcast. Did you like the style of the Matthew books better? They were a little bit smaller. They printed a little bit differently, a little different texture and feel. Or did you like the season 2 and season 3 design on those notebooks better? They were a little bit bigger, had a bit more space to write, a few more pages. I'm kind of on the fence about which one to get. And since they're for you, your feedback would be a big help in getting me off the schneid so I can make a decision, pull the trigger, and get those ordered for you. All right. Thank you in advance for weighing in on that. Thank you to everybody for talking about this fascinating book during these fascinating times with me. I appreciate you all so much. I'm Matt. This is the 10-Minute Bible Hour podcast. Let's do this again soon.